Well, Marianne, what's in your memo?
Thank you, Robbie. American politics has become a collective Rorschach test, where some see the dawning of a golden age, while others see a totalitarian coup. To those of us in the latter group, our democracy isn't dying in darkness, but in broad daylight. In the 2.5 months since Trump's second inauguration, we have seen steps in the direction of totalitarianism that leave millions of people aghast. The news at this point is everywhere, and anyone who doesn't see it is simply choosing not to. From gutting federal agencies, to imposing restrictions on universities and law firms so as not to in any way threaten officialdom, to deny entrance into the country of any visitor who has disagreed with Trump policies, to demanding that museums and other cultural institutions revise, erase, and whitewash whole portions of American history, to destroying systems of medical research and health and safety procedures, to threatening Social Security and Medicaid, to economic recklessness that will wreak havoc on the majority of Americans, while sure to serve well the corrupt in-group now in charge, to bullying Canada and Denmark and anyone else who gets in the way of their imperialistic designs, to outright threats to the Constitution, unabashed and brazen, on everything from birthright citizenship to limiting presidential terms to 2. The Trump juggernaut is staging a totalitarian coup in front of our eyes. Its goal, no longer such that anyone can honestly say, oh, don't be silly, he doesn't actually mean those things, is the ultimate suspension of free elections and the nullification of the U.S. Constitution. There's a season for everything, and this is a season for moral outrage. From the ill being denied needed medicine, to the hungry denied food they need in order to survive. Evil is as evil does. Here in the United States, people are literally being hunted down in their homes and on the streets, given no due process and sent to wherever. The most unfortunate among them so far have been Venezuelans, as way more people than violent criminals have been tossed into El Salvadorian prisons as part of the administration's mass deportation raids. Border czar Tom Homan admits to what he calls collateral arrests. Simply being a Latino with a tattoo is enough to put a man at risk. So today it's the Venezuelans with tattoos. Tomorrow it could be anyone. For those of us with a knowledge of 20th century European history, particularly those with an ancestral history of oppression, such events are chilling. At what point does it stop? When Dwight Eisenhower, the Supreme Allied Commander during World War II, first entered Ohrdruf concentration camp in Germany at the end of the war, he was deeply shaken by signs of unimaginable brutality he saw there. Touring the camp, Eisenhower commanded his staff to photograph the horrors. Start taking pictures, he told them, because someday some sons of are going to come along and say that this never happened. Oh, it did happen. And the fact that it did is more than historical fact. It's more than a warning. It's an urgent message to look around. That's why millions showed up at the hands-off protests on Saturday, making clear our intention to stand up to the assaults on our freedoms in any way that we can. We will not be gaslit into thinking, oh, it's really not so bad. And our challenge now is not only political but characterological. To not give in to complacency, to not normalize unacceptable behavior, and to not just hope that somebody else will fix it. And most of all, not to obey in advance. Attending a dinner party recently, I was surprised that anyone was talking about anything else, as though bringing it up would be impolite or something. And it wasn't that I thought anyone at the table doesn't care, because I know that they all do. But I've seen among people a strange unwillingness to let out the scream so many of us are feeling, as though holding it in will make the situation less awful. But it doesn't, actually. It's time to act on that scream, not simply hope that someone else will. Our job now is to do whatever we can, whatever is put in front of us, that's any way that we might help. American history so far is one of an ultimate hell no in the face of tyranny. Our ancestors, American people, have done it many times before, and I pray that we'll find it within ourselves to say hell no again. I know we've got it in us, and one thing is sure. If we don't act on the screams that we're now holding inside, there will be screams in the future impossible to hold in.
Oh, Marianne. Oh, dear. Look,
I knew you would love that one.
There are certainly things that the Trump administration is doing that I don't agree with, including most notably the tariffs and some of the deportation, particularly of students who merely spoke up in disagreement with Israeli foreign policy. I think it is ludicrous, and I've criticized it many times. I did my own radar on the subject. And they have made mistakes as well with the deportations of some of these other illegal immigrants. They've admitted to them. But do you think it is wise, I guess, to make a Holocaust metaphor? Most of the people they're deporting here are indeed members. They're illegal immigrants, all of them. They're members of a violent criminal gang that has been labeled terrorist. They're entitled to due process. I agree with you, because we need due process to make sure they're not citizens or legal migrants. And if they're not engaged in criminal behavior or gang association, I don't even want to prioritize their deportation in the first place. And they made a mistake with the hairdresser, and they sent that other guy to the wrong country, to El Salvador. Fine. Is that really the Holocaust? That's on the scale of the mass genociding of an entire race of people?
Please don't put words in my mouth. Okay. However, I am a Jew with rather extensive knowledge of what happened during the Holocaust. And as someone, as many people are, who have read much about Germany in the 1930s, there is chilling alignment here. You have a Republican congressman the other day who, at a congressional hearing, quoted Joseph Goebbels and didn't even realize the irony of that. He quoted Joseph Goebbels saying, the state absolutely has the right to determine the opinions of its people. Absolutely, we are too close. Now, as far as the Venezuelans are concerned, to me, it's not a small thing that, oh yeah, there's a pretty high percentage of those guys that we don't really know. In fact, they were not gang members. Scapegoating groups of people. This is where it starts. Now, I'm not trying to say what's going to happen, but absolutely we will not be shouted down when we talk about what happened in Germany in the 1930s, because so much of this is the playbook. You know, many years ago when Ivana, the mother, had said in a Vanity Fair article that Trump slept with Hitler's speeches next to his bed. Do you know what Trump's response to that was when he was asked by the press? His response was, well, that doesn't mean I read them. And he said to John Kelly said repeatedly that he said, well, you know, Hitler didn't do everything wrong. So this idea of putting any of us down, I remember when in the run-up to the Iraq War, many of us would say, this is just like Vietnam all over again. And people would say, oh, that's such a facile argument. Well, it turned out that we were right. So I think it's actually time for people to read a little bit more about the Third Reich. It's time for people to read books by Hannah Arendt. It's time for people to read books by Timothy Snyder. And yes, you guys believe what you believe, and no, you did not win in a landslide. And I know I'm speaking for many people as well. We are deeply concerned, and you're damn right. It's too close to Germany in the 1930s.
I am certainly happy to use hyperbole to describe awful situations like the calamitous decision to invade Iraq, which I am utterly opposed to, that resulted in the unnecessary deaths of millions of people in Iraq.
Thank you for acknowledging
that destabilized the globe. It was one of the most catastrophic policy decisions ever made, undertaken by not Donald Trump, by a previous Republican administration in cooperation and agreement with many commentators in the mainstream media and virtually the entire Democratic Party. Not the entire Democratic Party, but a lot of them. Hillary Clinton, certainly. Would we say those people are Nazi adjacent? Would we use that?
No, because
why does it get reserved for? None of what Trump has done is as bad as any of that. Is what I would say.
I would agree with that. I'm much more careful than you're giving me credit for here, actually, and you're putting some things together that I myself did not put together. The scapegoating of certain people, however, the way that if you compare the way George Bush talked about immigrants, and I'm talking about both George Bushes actually, but now I'm talking about George W., who was a Republican president, the way he talked about immigrants versus the way this president talks about immigrants, the blood and swell as though they are poisoning our homeland, which, by the way, was a Nazi phrase. So anytime anyone who is concerned about the rise of authoritarianism sees the scapegoating of whole groups of people, we know that that's part of the technique of rising authoritarianism and totalitarianism, and history bears us out on this.
All right, I'll give you the last word on that. It is your memo. There's more Rising coming up right after this.